Every single one of our teenagers should learn formal logic and apologetics starting in middle school, because if they don't, we will continue to see a massive abandonment of the Christian faith in our teenagers when they go off to college. Hi, my name is Carolina Lalinde, and this is Faith, Reason, and Culture, a channel where we analyze Christianity and other worldviews. Today, I want to talk to you about why Christian parents, teachers, and leaders need to start teaching apologetics to children and teenagers before they go off to college. Their young faiths get crushed from the anti-Christian arguments they face out there, and apologetics can help us prevent or at least mitigate this. And just in case you are tempted to accuse me of exaggerating and don't see what the big deal is, let me just share some facts and statistics to show you the importance of what I'm saying. About 60% of young people raised in the faith disconnect from Christianity between 18 and 22 years old, and only a small portion comes back. As of 2007, 77% of American adults describe themselves as Christians. 12 years later, only 65% did. That is a 12-point dip in just a little over a decade. In the same 12-year period, self-declared non-religious atheists and agnostic populations combined went from 14% to 26%. Two more jumps of that magnitude and we'll be at 50-50 with more and more of our kids on the other side. Here's another one, and this is an interesting statistic. Approximately 20,000 Americans convert to Islam every year. This was as of 2017. This number may be even larger today. So if you are above 30, you don't know the landscape our teenagers face at college. It is much more hostile than you imagine. Do not assume for a second that it's just as we had it, because it is not. Now, I will give you that our generation had to deal with the theory of evolution and its tentacles over most academic subjects. But once you left the classroom, most of society still lived under the Christian paradigm. At the popular level at least, gender was still believed to be determined by your physiology, and social justice had not been radicalized to the point of it no longer reflecting biblical principles. Today's teenagers don't have that benefit. They leave class and they have to keep fighting to uphold truth in every sphere of their lives. Critical race theory and the LGBTQA+ agenda are now additional layers of antagonism that they must learn to navigate. Can you place yourself in their shoes? Can you imagine how exhausting and difficult that must be? Remember, they are not adults yet, so they are also dealing with the regular challenges of growing up. And we, by omission, are sending them to that environment, completely vulnerable and unprepared. Okay, now to the good news, because I want to shake you into action but not leave you depressed. Christian apologetics does offer us 3 tools that can help us change this sad reality I just described. The first one is to use apologetics propositionally. That is, use logic, reason, evidence, and arguments to help our youth see the beauty and coherence of the Christian worldview. I don't know if you knew this, but every single core claim of Christianity can be put under the scrutiny of rational evaluation and remain standing. No other worldview gives you that kind of confidence. So once our students get this, they can present Christianity in an attractive and engaging manner to their secular peers. And that is a wonderful way of fulfilling their call to be salt and light to the world. The second tool is to use apologetics defensively. This consists in exposing our youth to postmodern and materialistic arguments against Christianity, unfiltered, and then guiding them through the intellectual process of responding to these arguments. We are to do this early and from the safety of our schools, churches, and homes, so we can give our children enough time and the emotional safety to struggle with these questions. The best time to start this is the middle school years. At this age, their intellectual curiosity has awakened and it is fresh and unbiased. This is our window to start molding their critical thinking skills. It takes time to build a worldview and to connect big ideas in our minds. And if kids are exposed to big philosophical ideas for the first time when they get to college, guess who is going to plant the first worldview seeds in their minds? The atheist professor, of course. And apologetics at that point will be less effective, working more as damage control than active defense. Take, for example, this postmodern argument and consider all the time, energy, and knowledge required to respond to it. Christianity is a narrative, and no single narrative can claim universal authority because all knowledge and belief systems are situated within cultural, historical, and linguistic contexts. Christianity's claim to absolute truth is therefore not inherently superior to other worldviews, but merely one interpretation among many. Now, the short response to this is this one. Ultimate realities do exist. There are plenty of arguments in cosmology, metaphysics, and epistemology that show us that ultimate realities exist, and to which scientism is unable to respond. Mathematical realities, moral values, consciousness, contingency, unity, and simplicity are some of them. And if ultimate realities exist, then the closer you get to know them, the superior your worldview is. Period. It is not a matter of exclusivity, but of truth. As you can imagine, to unpack and understand this response can take a very long time. I know it took me years, so this is why we must start early. Now, chances are that we won't be able to cover exhaustively all the potential objections that our teenagers will face out there. And that's okay, because defensive apologetics doesn't only help respond to certain arguments, but trains and develops the cognitive and critical thinking skills necessary to tackle down any potential attack to the Christian worldview, even the ones you cannot foresee. Apologetics train you to identify the underlying assumptions of any proposition and the internal logic of any argument. It gives you the tools to navigate objections systematically, no matter the area of knowledge where you find them. It could be biology, psychology, political science, philosophy, you name it. Now let me give you two real-life applications of this. One, in virtually every faculty of sciences, our children are told the following. Darwinian evolution explains all of life, and therefore there is no need for a God. That proposition has assumptions and fallacies that our kids need to know how to uncover and analyze. To begin with, it assumes naturalism is true. Naturalism is the belief that matter, energy, time, and space are all there is. Second, it is reductionistic. This means it takes complex aspects of human life, including morality, consciousness, and even cultural phenomena, and reduces them to less complex aspects such as matter and energy undergoing random mutations, which is a fallacy. Third, it assumes scientism, that is, the epistemological position which claims that science, by investigating natural causes, is the only way to obtain knowledge. According to this position, metaphysical, philosophical, or theological insights are not legitimate ways of understanding the world around us. Apologetics train us to spot and understand all these philosophical positions, assumptions, and fallacies, which are always behind assertions about reality. And that alone is already a very important skill. It's like learning to read the subtitles of every statement we find out there. So going back to our example, once assumptions are spotted, the student's response must always be to request reasons of why such assumptions are true. Our students shouldn't buy the professor's proposition at face value. He is making the claim, and he must argue for the validity of all these underlying assumptions. Let's start with naturalism. The teacher should present a defense in favor of this belief that is strong enough to overpower all the arguments that exist in favor of the existence of the soul, of God, and of transcendent morality, which are no minor things. The same goes for the other two assumptions. The burden of proof is on the person doing the assertion, not on the students. If our kids knew this, they would weather these attacks way more successfully. If the professor does assume the burden of proof, which is unlikely, but let's say he does, our students should be able to have a reasonable and enriching debate with him. They would be prepared for this because we train them well. If he doesn't assume the burden of proof, this signals to our students his philosophical biases and lack of open-mindedness, which really takes a lot of pressure off them. You won't lose sleep over some assertion if its author won't bother explaining it to you properly, right? Here's another one teenagers get a lot. Belief in God arises from a psychological need for comfort, protection from fear, meaning in suffering, and assurance of justice in the afterlife. It is pure wish fulfillment. Now, this one doesn't need so much the spotting of assumptions, but realizing that it's mostly an emotional claim. First of all, even if the belief in God arose purely from a need for comfort, that in itself does not prove God doesn't exist. It is true that on many occasions people turn to God due to suffering and injustice, but again, this is not proof against his existence in any sense. If anything, one could argue that God does exist because over and over again, people that look for him in the middle of suffering report having found him. So the whole assertion is more an attempt to manipulate you emotionally, to make you feel deceived, childish, or stupid. Once again, logical training helped us realize that there are no contradictions here. And to finish, I want to leave you with yet another aspect of apologetics that our kids need, the third tool, and that is training in conversational tools that will enable them to talk about these topics in a productive way. Talking about these topics is difficult. We all know it. They are very complex, so they quickly deplete your patience. Worldviews are at stake, so emotions are usually involved. And on top of that, the people involved are not always properly trained in logical argumentation. Resources such as Tactics by Greg Koukl, A True Good Story by Paul Gold, or When God Goes to Starbucks by Paul Copan propose the use of questions and stories in apologetics so we can get past conflict and avoidance, and we can have more honest conversations and arrive at true core ideas and arguments. This is so important because we are called to season our words and to be at peace with everybody as much as we can. But many times it doesn't come naturally. So why not train ourselves and our children in this as well? So I rest my case, and if you are persuaded, I have a challenge for you. Talk about this to someone who has youth under their care, a teacher, a youth pastor, the principal of your children's school. Tell them about this video and convey the urgency of this message. And if everything else fails, pick up a copy of a resource of your interest and start training yourself and your kids at home. I will leave many resources in the description below. Our brothers and sisters in apologetics have done good work, and all is left for us to do is to bring it home to our kids. So remember, teach apologetics early, defensively, and not as damage control. Thank you for watching.